Hello and welcome to this edition of Your Health, Your Wealth. I'm your host, Dr. Eddie Patton, and another exciting edition today because I have with me a guest, a very dynamic personality, a wonderful leader whom I've gotten to know well over the years. Today, I will be talking with Dr. Linda Villarreal. And just to give you a little bit of background, because I really want Linda to talk more about her history, but Dr. Villarreal is a now retired physician from Texas, and very passionate about the House of Medicine and specifically about the issues and the practice of medicine at the border, the Texas-Mexico border. Nowadays, there's a lot of publicity, a lot of political hype about things that are going regarding immigration at the border. But when it boils down to it, people have to get taken care of. And the dynamics of practicing medicine along the Texas-Mexico border may be a little bit different from other places in the state. And so, I'm excited to talk with Dr. Villarreal about that and some of these issues. She's well equipped to speak on this. She's a former president of the Texas Medical Association, the largest state medical association in the country. And again, just a very dynamic personality. So I'm very excited to talk with Dr. Villarreal. Can I call you Linda?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, thanks for coming on. And let's start by just, telling everybody a little bit about your history and your journey. And I always love talking with you. We're involved in a number of boards and committees together about just how you navigated this thing to become a practicing physician down in the Valley. Okay.
You interject at any time because I am notorious. I'm actually born and reared in Edinburgh, Texas. That is along the Mexican border. I went to the University of Texas when you didn't have to say where it was, which of course is Austin, Texas. I married my high school sweetheart about a year before I was able to finish college. I mean, not finish, but in other words, finish college as a single girl. We married a year before my graduation. I married a young man from my hometown, so he changed my mind, saying medical school was going to take too long, and wouldn't I rather be a pharmacist? And, at the time, I was, 21 years old. I said, yeah, I guess so. Fine. I'm married, okay. And I was fortunate enough to find a job in hospital pharmacy at Methodist Hospital up on the hill when we didn't have Audie Murphy. We didn't have Bexar County. We didn't have anything up there except Methodist Hospital. So everybody was telling the owners of that hospital that they were crazy for putting a hospital out in the boondocks. And literally it was. The deer would come up to the sliding doors and open it. I practiced hospital pharmacy for 7 years until my husband then decided you got an offer you couldn't refuse. In a special program, again, in Edinburgh, Texas. So we packed up and moved back to Edinburgh, and then I pursued retail pharmacy, which retrospectively I did not like. And one of the things I learned as a pharmacist in Edinburgh, Texas, is that there weren't enough physicians. There weren't enough female physicians. And I would often get that little old lady kind of wave to me from around the counter and say, can you come here? And it was inevitably a question that they should have asked their physician, but were embarrassed or ashamed or didn't know how to ask. And so they would ask me questions. And that was actually my first, again, realization that, again, we needed not only more primary care physicians, we needed more female primary care physicians. Ultimately, what happened is I had 2 children in those 10 years. So I had marriage and family done. And unfortunately, my marriage did not last much longer after that. And so then I said, well, I don't have an excuse, explanation, or reason to not pursue my primary passion of pursuing a medical degree. That came to me when I was a very young child because I was asthmatic, very sickly asthmatic. And my own doctor, I can remember him making a house call up in his big black Cadillac. He was wearing a suit and carrying a bag. And that was just what stuck in my head as far as how a physician would practice and take care of their patients. So then fast forward to the end of my pharmacy career, and I pursued medical school applications for a year. Quite expensive process, as we all know, and didn't get in. And keep in mind, I was a little bit older than the average applicant. So I pursued a medical degree in Mexico. A lot of our physicians along the border actually were from Mexico. We just didn't have enough doctors along the border. We didn't have the opportunity to begin with one. We didn't have that encouragement from the regular people along the border. And so we didn't have enough doctors. Long story short, I finished my medical school in Mexico, did my clinicals in my favorite city, San Antonio, and then pursued a residency in internal medicine in Cleveland, Ohio, because, you know, when you apply for matching, you go where you're told or where you match. So I started my internship in Cleveland, Ohio. So I went from the south coast to the north coast, and that was a culture shock in itself. Fast forward a couple of years, I had a friend who knew a friend who knew a friend who had a connection with residency programs in Texas. And so they told him, I said, you know, there might be an opening in Texas. And so he asked me if I was interested. And I said, sure. He said, does it matter where? And I said, no. You might have to. I was already into my second year. And he said, you might have to repeat your second year. And I said, I'll go back to medical school if you get me out of Cleveland, Ohio. So fortunately,
enough winters up there, probably.
Oh yeah, I had 2 wild and crazy, very cold winters. So I ended up in El Paso, and again, an internal medicine residency, an amazing educational experience, and it was on the border. So I was familiar with the language, I was familiar with the people, and so I really enjoyed being an internal medicine resident at, it was a Texas Tech Health Science Center in El Paso, Texas. So I entered the profession mostly for men as a pharmacist, and I entered the profession mostly for men as an internal medicine doctor. And in fact, I was the only female internist in the upper Rio Grande Valley, McAllen, Edinburgh. I ended up going into private practice unbeknownst to me because I was still kind of in shock. So my brothers were handling things for me. And I'm out looking for a job. And one of my brothers says, get your, you know what, back here. Don't sign anything. Don't talk to anybody. Just come back. And I said, okay. Long story short, there was a physician in Edinburgh, Texas, who had filed for bankruptcy. This is 1989, if you can imagine a primary care doctor filing for bankruptcy, and not too much has changed, unfortunately. The bank that was taking that building was our family banker. And so within 2 to 3 weeks, I am now the pride owner of a mortgage of a medical building that had no patients, really. But I had never... I guess what I used to say is there were 3 things I said I would never do. Never return to the Valley. So I returned in June of 89. I would never get married again. And I married in July of 89. Then I said I would never go into solo practice. Yeah. And I opened my office in August of 1989. So a good lesson in never say never. That's really where I am now. There's a lot of stuff in between. I was very active in advocacy because we had a shortage of physicians in the Valley. Yeah. We had a shortage of female physicians in the Valley. we had a very high malpractice rate, and actually Hidalgo County was notorious for high rewards against physicians.
Really?
So everybody was wanting their case heard in Hidalgo County, and we really needed to fix that. So in the mid-'90s, actually early '90s, the TMA, in conjunction with the Board of Health Caucus that was established, started looking into advocacy on how we could actually change that malpractice problem in Hidalgo County and along the border. And we were successful with significant advocacy, First Tuesdays and trips to Austin. We engaged the physicians along the border, beginning from El Paso all along down to Brownsville. And we were able to be part of a significant success in passing tort reform in 2003. Now, what did that do for my patients along the border? It allowed us to recruit and actually find and recruit specialists. We had no secondary specialists in our community. Any kind of a brain injury would have to be flown to Corpus, Dallas, Houston, San Antonio. And as a neurologist, you know, Eddie, that magical hour is something that we cannot afford to lose in reference to. And unfortunately, I even had a patient who did that because we had no neurosurgeons. OB-GYNs, they wouldn't come down because, you know, how high the malpractice rate was. It still is, but it was horrible then. So that kind of sparked my advocacy because along the border, but basically all of South Texas, we have neighborhoods where people don't have access to health care. People don't have access to physicians who speak their language. People don't have insurance and they don't know what to do. And so I felt it my responsibility because my mother taught me that. Mother was very active in community service. And I felt that this was how she died for me to come to Edinburgh when I had no intentions. And I think it was her spirit within me to say, okay, I'm pursuing community service within my profession.
Yeah, and I was going to say along that lines as far as being an advocate, like I mentioned, I've known you for years in the advocacy circuit, and you are a passionate advocate, you know, rising to the ranks of president of the Texas Medical Association. So you talked about this border caucus. What types of issues did you see and identify that really drove you to say, you know, I need to really look out for my community in Austin and in D.C. and all the other places that you advocated for?
Well, unfortunately, and I'm also an AMA delegate, as you know. So unfortunately, the problem of 35 years ago, not enough physicians, not enough bilingual physicians in a geography that is at least 50 to 70% Spanish speaking. Not enough residency programs. Our GME down there was almost non-existent. We had one family practice residency from the University of Texas. And as you know, the more you bring residents to a geography, the highly likely that they will stay there.
Absolutely.
So
they stay where they train. Absolutely.
Right. So those are the issues that we addressed, not me personally, but me as part of the team that was created with the Board of Health Caucus. That was our mission statement. How can we improve access to health care? How can we improve the patient-physician relationship? Now, we're going back to 2003, Eddie. Now, don't those terms sound familiar even still?
Oh, absolutely.
And so what we did work on aggressively is making sure that we had representation in Austin, representation in the Texas Medical Association. But so many of our physicians along the border had solo practices and couldn't afford, actually, to leave their practice for a day or two to go and advocate for not only their patients, but for their practice. And me being who I was and my personality, I guess, and my passion, I said, okay, I'll do this, okay? And so even as a solo practice internist, I was told by my business manager one year, he said, you've only worked 36 weeks out of the 52 this year. And I said, and your point is? But so it doesn't.
You're working for the people, though. You still working, just working for
Well, that's interesting you would say that, because when I became an AMA delegate, that's a whole week out in June and another almost week in November. And after my husband died, I had my business manager go with me to Chicago, right? And, with the AMA delegation, your meetings start at 6 a.m. and they go until who knows what time in the late evening. And so when I would leave the hotel room that she and I were sharing, she finally made a comment. She said, wow, you really are working. This isn't a vacation. And I said, oh, I need a vacation from this meeting when I get home. But again, the same issues that were being faced by our local physicians was a geographical, but also a national. We have solo practices everywhere, and all of those physicians still struggle to maintain the doors open for lack of payment equity, for lack of, or for too much intervention by government, whether it's state, local, or national. Those problems still exist. And I started this 35 years ago,
Wow.
So you can't give up. You can't back away from whatever little steps in this battle we have actually accomplished. And we have tort reform every 2 years in the state legislature. Somebody's out there trying to reverse it. Scope of practice every 2 years, somebody's out there trying to do what we do without having done what we did, right?
That's right.
So we can't really rest on our laurels. And even when before I became TMA president, I was actually on the Council on Legislation committee. And I remember dealing with Dan, and I don't know if you ever met Dan Finch, but he was awesome. And Darren Whitehurst. And so they would discuss all of these things that their advocacy team was doing. And then I'd stand up and pound on the table and say, yeah, but that's not the Valley, You don't understand. It's totally different. What I perhaps learned is the Valley population also exists in East Austin, in South San Antonio, and the west side of El Paso, and in pockets of rural geography within our counties in Texas. And I learned that, but continuing to be involved and going to Austin and attending First Tuesdays. I believe I missed only 1 year, and that was when my husband died. But that's my background, and I continue to have that passion.
And nowadays, because I know what's been going on, we have a new medical school now down in the Valley, and for all those listeners who may not be familiar with this terminology, Valley is like a general term that we use for the Texas Texas-Mexico border. You could probably give some history behind that, but now that they're in medical schools and we're increasing this awareness, do you think that it's gotten better there?
Oh, absolutely. We have multiple hospitals, and let me just say for anyone listening, the Valley is like DFW was 35, 40 years ago. You would go from Fort Worth to Dallas and half a dozen towns in between. Well, the Valley goes from Brownsville on the coast all the way up to just beyond Laredo. So we cut pretty close to 1,000 miles of border as far as the Valley is concerned. But you're absolutely right. We have a medical school in Edinburgh, Texas, about 3 miles from my home. And that has made a difference, yes. It shows them the geography, and it shows them how beautiful our geography is. We have every hospital just about with a residency program now in multiple specialties. That definitely has made a difference. We still need that advocacy. We still need physicians to represent those that can't go. and make sure that we are heard, because the problems of maintenance of our solo practice, to maintain our offices open, to protect that patient-physician relationship, very important, and it still exists.
Yeah, and one of the things that I found, even training, like you mentioned earlier, that you have these pockets throughout that represent the valley all over here, even here in Houston. Training at Ben Taub and other facilities here, there was almost a fear of patients coming to the hospital or coming to the doctor's office because of some of these issues that we've been facing. So they would only come when things were really bad. Like, if they had diabetes, it wasn't, just when it was pre-diabetic or when it was treatable. It was when it was really severe, when they're, having a diabetic crisis or something like that. So, are those similar to some of the things that you're seeing in the True Valley and
yes,
and
absolutely. We are a very proud culture. Just a real quick note: my grandmother died from stomach cancer in the early 60s, but she wouldn't go see the doctor because she would pay her bills, and she didn't have insurance. That was before Medicare. So she wouldn't see the doctor unless she had money, and she died in her 60s from stomach cancer. So that is the culture that we have. We have a very proud population who will not, until they just absolutely have to go see a doctor. And what doctor is that? The emergency room. So that continuity of care doesn't quite exist completely. It's better. I cannot underestimate that. It is better. More doctors, more hospitals, more physician offices, more urgent cares, and more advocacy in our own neighborhood. Physicians are the leader of the team. We have nurses, we have nurse practitioners, physician assistants, we have social workers, we have community care for our patients, and so things are better, but we don't stop. We have to keep maintaining and looking better at those problems that still exist.
In closing, your leadership, your journey, it's truly inspirational. I have learned a lot from you as a leader in this healthcare arena, especially here in Texas. Your passion. Now, what would you say to young physicians out there who are thinking about setting up shop in the Valley, and it may be kind of apprehensive because, again, of all the political climate and everything that's going on? But what would be your advice to them about overcoming that and setting up shop in the community there at the Texas-Mexico border?
I am very much encouraged, especially the medical school, of the type of young physicians that we are educating. What I would say is, do not be afraid. I had no intentions of doing how I started, but I would never go back. I would never not want to do what I did. Of course, that's retrospectively, but I would encourage any physician, if they have the passion that is required for being a physician, no matter what your specialty is, to come to the Valley and come to Texas if you're from out of state. It is an excellent place to grow up in, an excellent place to set up shop, an excellent place to rear your children. Look how well I turned out. But more importantly, Eddie, if I may end up with this, is that I want to talk to that 6th grade young lady. We still need female physicians. I want to encourage them. And to end with the fact that, yes, I was elected as the first and only Hispanic female to hold the office of the Texas Medical Association president. I'm very proud of that, and I want to really encourage young women, whether they're Hispanic or not, to follow their dreams and their passion if medicine is something they've considered.
Wow. This has been great. Thank you so much. Such a dynamic person in Dr. Linda Villarreal, retired physician, but just physician leader and trailblazer in healthcare. And so I really appreciate you taking out the time from your lovely away home from Texas. You know, it's summer here, so during the summers you finally got out, huh?
Yep, I did. Well, thank you for inviting me, Eddie. I enjoyed it, and anytime you invite me again.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all for listening to this edition of Your Health, Your Wealth. If you enjoyed this issue, please share it with friends and family and tune in for future episodes.